the more mainstream machine learning becomes, the more concerning it will be. And the reason is because you'll have more and more businesses, more companies, or even more individuals have access to some data, and they start, building machine learning. So, and there are few things that can go wrong in there. First, the data which is collected, for what purpose it is, or the data that is accessed, um, how biased it is. Sometimes it is biased and it's really unknown.
Hello and welcome to a whole new episode of Engati CX. I'm your host, Sarang Sharma, and today we have a technology expert with us on the show. But before I introduce you to our guest, allow me to introduce you to the magic of Engati. So, Engati is the world's leading multilingual, no code digital CX platform available across 14 channels with 45,000 solutions created across 187 countries in every domain and use case. Engati has also been recognized as a top platform by INC.com, TechWorld, CIO, and many others. We run the Engati blog, video channel, and the Engati CX podcast, receiving upwards of 400,000 visitors annually. And now for our guest. Romina Sharifpour is an AI ML solutions architect at Amazon Web Services, AWS. She is a data science and AI leader with a track record of leading, designing, and implementing machine learning AI and data science solutions. She has helped numerous clients building innovative and progressive corporate strategies fostered by investments in data science and AI. She has worked as a technical and strategic leader, executing across disciplines to engage senior stakeholders and design robust analytic solutions within the AI and ML space, with an emphasis on cutting edge technology. Her leadership qualities and strategic visions are amplified by her experience in building and managing high performing teams, coaching, mentoring in tandem with endeavor to stay up to date with the relevant advancements in the field. But before we dive into our interview with Romina, don't forget to subscribe to Engati and tap the bell icon to get exclusive content from thought leaders across the globe. So welcome, Romina.
Thanks, Sarang. Very glad to be here today. Looking forward to have a chat about some of the emerging issues we're facing nowadays.
Yeah, likewise. Okay, so let's start with the question and answer for you. We have quite a few questions for you. So the first
Okay.
one, uh, we have been reading about or learning about a lot of deep learning models nowadays, such as the GPT-2, or the GPT generative pre-trained transformer 3 model that has been in the articles, and we read about it every day. And we have also read that it needs very huge investments to train and operate. So how soon do you think we can see the democratization of such models?
Yeah, so I think we've already seen a lot of advancement when it comes to deep learning, especially, and that's become possible with the immense amount of access that everyone has, with
Hmm.
a lot better computation power compared to the past, as well as getting lots more data and restoring them at a lot easier manner, as well as more effective and costly way, less costly way. So, but when we think about GP3s, I think they have taken the deep learning to a different level. Particularly GP3, it's really massive in a way that it's trained, and the training takes more than 175 billion parameters. So you
Hmm.
can imagine how large this deep neural
Yeah.
network is. And some estimations, no one really actually knows all the details, and the how they did actually train this model, and so on and so forth. But some of the estimation takes, if you were going to use some of the available GPUs out there in the market, that will take you more than 350 years to train this. And the cost would be something, in the ballpark of $1 million. So 4.6, which is really immense
Yeah.
in terms of both, the time as well as the cost that you would need to train such model. But
Right.
obviously, there are different ways around it. So this being trained on a distributed way on distributed GPUs, which has made it possible in a timely manner. So when I think about democratization, I keep thinking about there are really, really few companies out there that they have that sophistication and they have that skill set to actually sit and build something like this from the scratch. So it's not just about having the resources in terms of, the GPUs, in terms of how I'm going to actually train this model, but it's about having the skill set. It's about the cost in terms of money and what value you're going to drive out of that entire process. And it's not just about training. There's a lot of trial and error involved in building a model like that. Well, GPT-3 is very powerful, so it's actually known to solve lots of NLP problems. And when I think about it, again, is not something that is not mainstream, is not something every company wants to jump in and train something at that scale. But the API is going to be available to many businesses and organizations. And one of the worries when you think about such a powerful model is how this model is going to be used. For what type of purposes? Is it harmful to the humanity or society? So there are also lots of social concern from an ethical also point of view that you can think about, when a model is so powerful to solve lots of different type of NLP problems. But the API actually is going to be available, and again, the deployment, because the model itself is very large, you need some really good amount of RAM to be able to deploy that. What I've read is about 350 gigabytes or even more, which is quite possible when you use, for example, cloud technology or some big data platform. That's not really something which is not achievable. So I expect many companies which need that type of algorithm to use the API instead of trying to build something similar or invest so much money in building a replicate of something which is already out there in the market. So that's how I say it, actually.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so moving on. What do you think are ways to handle? First of all, what is model drift, and then what are the ways do you think we can handle model drift for AI models deployed in the enterprise?
Yeah, so model drift is actually a very interesting one. I think model drift is when there are some changes, in the underlying either data that you've built your model on, or sometimes even the inner workings, the way you've mapped your input and output variable. There are some changes because a lot of things are revolving around us. The data is revolving, lots of different things, and your environment revolves, which sometimes affects the way you collect and process that data. And that will lead to the model predictions to be a little bit sometimes, most likely in the commercial setting, they're not as accurate as they were when the model was built for that specific purpose. So when I think about it, model drift normally happens because either your data is changed, the distribution of your data is changed, and when you think about those changes, it can be a gradual change. It can be a recurring change, for example, seasonal change that can happen due to some events. It can be sometimes a sudden or abrupt change. Think about what happened this year with coronavirus. So maybe if you've been collecting a lot of data, you will see perhaps a lot different patterns, emerging within your data and the distributions that you've collected. So that's one way to think about it. And sometimes you've trained this model, but the way that your input and output data have been mapped together, those relationships starts to be changing. How would you attack, or how would you actually solve for this model or concept drift problem? First of all, I would think it's very important to have some monitoring in place, monitoring for your data, to look at the distribution of your data on a scheduled sort of basis and compare and see how this data is evolving. Is the distribution consistent? Is it changed? And sometimes actually you will come to some conclusion that maybe there's some models that you could build for particular distributions that you observe, and maybe you can even have I'm thinking a little bit out of the box here, but have some smart models to overtake one another given on what type of distributions they're observing of the data that you've collected. Other is to have some benchmark in place with regards to the inferences, with regards to the predictions that you achieve out of your model, and you can see how those predictions also changing or evolving over time, and take the action which you think, is it degrading, is it fine, is it just changing at a very a small rate. So those are all informs to you what actions you have to take depending on your business objectives and business need. They will be different, so there's no really one size fits all type of thing. But when we think about real scenarios, like a lot of the even problems that we solve via machine learning, sometimes retraining or updating some algorithms, you can update the model. So those are actually a very good way to ensure that you tackle that concept drift on a timely manner. um, and sometimes I think that's something you will have to do regardless of your model is changing or not changing. Think about some recommendation engine, for example, that your date, your business catalog, those products are changing all the time. The customers that coming to your website, they're changing all the time. So that's something, whether you like it or not, you do have to retrain your model all the time to keep that sort of recommendation engine be going in a in a right way. There are some weighting mechanism you could think of. Again, you always have to look at what data you have, what problem you're solving for, what algorithm you're using. But sometimes there are ways that you can assign weight to the, for example, more recent data to be having a higher weight, and they are more influential in the prediction you make, as opposed to the oldest and more historical data. So that's a decision also you can make. And the other one, which I mentioned, and I thought about it just out of the box, is to have actually multiple model and see which one actually works in which of those scenarios when you see different changes, especially if you're working with some type of recurring changes that you observe within your data. You can always think about those as well.
Right. That's, thank you for that thought. So you mentioned earlier that GP3s and models like that are very powerful and very revolutionary and could be used for like they are used for many sensitive use cases, as well as they, if gone into the wrong hands, they can be used unethically as well.
Yeah.
So what is your take on ethical or fair AI?
Yeah. I always actually think the more mainstream machine learning becomes, the more concerning it will be. And the reason is because you'll have more and more businesses, more companies, or even more individuals have access to some data, and they start, building machine learning. So, and there are a few things that can go wrong in there. First, the data which is collected, for what purpose it is, or the data that is accessed. How biased it is. Sometimes it is biased and it's really unknown. So the way it's been collected, no one actually has any idea if there is some bias with that data. So it's pretty hidden, even from, even if you want to be ethical, but sometimes it is hard to detect those issues within the data file. And then again, when you have less skilled people start, working with this data, those who are perhaps not very expert within machine learning, that also can amplify that problem, because lack of skills might lead to less understanding of how this algorithm can be biased because of the way it's been trained with the biased data. And many simply are not aware that algorithms are as good as the way you train them. So pretty much the way you train them to be, they can be that, personality, I'd call it. They can be racist, they can be whatever you actually train them to be. So that is why we actually been observing lots of movements and lots of discussion and a lot of emerging research in the area of fair AI and ethical AI. And I kept thinking maybe at some point in the future, it hasn't happened anywhere else, but I keep thinking if this is going to continue and the machine learning becomes more mainstream and the concern it starts to be even getting higher and higher, I think at some point maybe there will be some regulation and some compliances that the governments start to put into place to have some control over how these AI technologies is used and how different users are impacted by by these technologies. Just like many of, for example, businesses like financial institutions, that they've always had these, really stringent compliances. So maybe there are some new additions that can happen. And when you think about ethical AI, I always think that the privacy and confidentiality of the consumer information is always a very, very important sensitive data, because a lot of consumers are not really aware, that what data from them is collected, all the time. And we've become so comfortable, with all these, digital screens, whether it's our mobile phone or laptop, without really paying attention. We're actually emitting lots and lots of data, which is collected. But in our conscious mind, sometimes we don't really know about it. And maybe if we knew, we would maybe behave differently, or we would be just more cautious of that. So I think that will be an ongoing, a very important issue, what to be collected, what not to be collected. And I think we'll see some companies perhaps that they go beyond, beyond that, being very, very responsible, and perhaps come up with maybe some new technology, some type of, I'll say, new breakthrough to sort of solve a little bit for some of these problems with regards to the privacy and technology.
Yeah, privacy is like turning into a very big concern in the recent past. Yeah,
it is indeed.
Yeah. Okay, so since you said that now AI has been becoming it's turning to become very common. So what are the market trends that you see in the ML AI market?
Yeah. So I think what I'm observing is that data science and data scientists, they are becoming a lot more common. So you can see them in many, many organizations. When I look back within Australian market, when I look back about 6 or 7 years ago, very few companies, they did actually have data scientist role, and they were, hiring data scientists very actively. But nowadays, pretty much every client, every organization that I turn my head, there are some people called data scientists. There are actually some use cases that they want to tackle. So you can see that the market definitely has moved quite a lot. It's something known to most of the businesses that you can drive value from your data. You can actually build some machine learning and AI capability. And within that, you can see that there are more and more specialized skill set coming out of that. For example, you can see many places are not hiring data scientists anymore. They're hiring data scientists specialized within a particular domain. Let's say it could be NLP or computer vision, or specific to an industry, the one who have a very good domain knowledge of, let's say, utilities or financial services. And you can see the data scientist skills are also evolving to actually match that demand in the market. You can see now, for example, cloud and being able to work on the cloud, it's becoming really, really important for the data scientists to work on. Also, we can see that there is this role of data scientists, which was very fuzzy, a few years back. It's starting to become a lot more clearer. I see a lot of teams with a very clear definition of, this is the data science team, this is what they do. I have my machine learning engineer, that's what they do. I have also the software engineer, that they all work together, to build, a machine learning solution and put it into production. So I can see that within many of the companies, that it's become a lot more cleaner and cleaner. There's no really confusion, and no one is really chasing unicorn anymore, that I'm going to hire one person to do everything for me from the first to the last bit of this entire process. With regards to the companies out there. Some of them are very mature, and you can see that they've passed that stage of experimentation, with the data science and use cases, and they're now thinking about, putting all these into production. How they can scale those solutions. And then there's actually lots of interest within the MLOps space that, what are the best practices when it comes to operationalizing, all these machine learning models that are built. So there's actually, this is for more mature, companies. There are also, those which they're still catching up. They're not as mature, so they're still into identifying what use cases I would do, how I'm going to experiment. So they are still in the early stage. So you see actually mix of both, but definitely we have some more advanced, players out there that they're well ahead of, experimentation, they're ahead of curve. I think data quality still remains an issue. So a lot of the time, because you haven't had that data collection in place for many years back, you do not have sometimes enough history of good quality data to put into your work. So that still remains an issue. Sometimes, you want to do some really amazing work, but the data is not really there, or the data quality is not there. But again, you can see it is actually moving. So looking into future, a lot of these companies will have decent amount of data with the good quality that can actually help them to build on what they have today. Other trends is AutoML. So you can see actually mix of a skill set. There are some people who still can do machine learning, but they get use of, off the shelf already built ML products or automated ML. They're becoming actually quite popular in the market as well, because the ease of the use and pretty much experimentation for many places.
And also, I think the cost to experiment for any small businesses who don't have a lot of capital to invest to experiment have now reduced a lot, attributed to cloud providers like AWS. And
Absolutely. You don't have to go and bring on very expensive, data science resources to actually sit and build for you, on the scratch. And again, thinking about where you are at the journey, to what level you want to invest into that. Sometimes they are actually very optimal solutions.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so any other comments or any other thoughts that you would like to leave our viewers with?
Well, no, not really. Just it's been really great to chat today, and yes, it's been a pleasure. So thank you for inviting me on board.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Romina, for giving us your time.
Thank you, Saran.
Your insights are really valuable, and know our audience is going to love this interview.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
Yeah, have a nice
day. You were gonna say something?
Yeah, I was going to leave ending comments. So yeah, we will be back with a new episode with a brand new expert soon. So stay tuned, and we will see you around for the next one. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.